We now move on to the next plenary presentation, which is on indigenous people and their melting abodes, for which we have with us our eminent personality, Engineer Sonam Wangchuk, inventor and educator, director, HIAL. May I invite you, sir, for your presentation. Engineer Sonam Wangchuk, in 1988, just after his education and cultural movement of Ladakh, finished his engineering and founded SCMOL, which is Students Educational Cultural Movement of Ladakh, to support the Ladakhi children and youth in educationally challenging and culturally confusing times in 1994. He was instrumental in launching Operation New Hope, a triangular collaboration among the government, village communities and civil society to reform the government school system. Has been teaching innovation at SECMOL Alternative School, where together with the students he designed to build solar heated buildings that are low cost, made of earth, mud and maintain plus 15 degrees centigrade even when the outside temperature is minus 15 degrees in Ladakhi winters. He invented the ice stupa, the artificial glacier which stores the unused steam heaters waters in winter in the form of giant ice cones or stupas, and increasing the water in late spring as they melt. Of course, when the farmers need the water. And he is recipient of many prestigious awards, along with the UNESCO Chair of Earth Architecture of India in 2014, Real Heroes Award by CNN IBN Channel, and Man of the Year by the Week magazine in India in 2001, and Governor's Medal by J&K State Government in 1996. So ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together to welcome Engineer Sonam Wangchuk for his presentation, Indigenous People and Their Melting Abodes.
Thank you. Namaste, Salam and Jule as we greet in Ladakh. I bring you warm greetings from the otherwise very cold and frozen region of Ladakh on behalf of the indigenous people of Himalayas. I'm happy to be here celebrating the resources, our wealth and the people, particularly the indigenous people in these regions who are at the frontiers of the receiving end of climate change for no fault of theirs. We in the high Himalayas have a very, very fragile ecosystem, and our reason for existence is our glaciers, and they are melting away very fast thanks to what is happening in the big cities of the civilized world. I'm saying this because often indigenous people are considered primitive, backwards, tribal and so on. But I think what we call modern today are founded on the science and modernity of destruction, because that's what we are seeing now after 250 years of industrialization. So people in the Himalayas like us are not against modernity or science, but we believe more in the science of healing rather than the science of plundering and destruction that has landed us in this situation. So I'll share with you a little journey of my life in Ladakh and what we do there, and to celebrate what people in these difficult terrains can contribute to the planet. And indigenous people around the world have a host of lessons for the rest of the world, because if we are to come out from this modernization of destruction, then suddenly the indigenous people become a source of wisdom and knowledge, because the simplicity with which they live their lives could be the biggest wisdom to dawn upon the rest of the planet. And that's why from Ladakh I always give this message to please live simply in the big cities so that we in the mountains may simply live. So I'll share with you with some pictures what is happening in the mountains of Ladakh in the high Himalayas, and what we are trying to do and what we expect the rest of the world to do. So since it is about a place that is very different from most of the earth, I think pictures will be more useful than my many words. That's Ladakh, top north of India, across the Himalayas rather than in the Himalayas. Himalayas are lush green like Kashmir and Shimla, which is not how Ladakh is. Ladakh actually is across the barrier that the Himalayas form for even the monsoon clouds. So we are in the rain shadow where very little precipitation happens. Whatever happens in the winters keeps collecting because it's snow and ice and forms glaciers. Now, Hindu Kush Himalayas are often called the third pole of the planet, largest reservoir of fresh water after the north and south pole in frozen form. I took this picture from the aircraft some time ago, and just in this one frame you can see roughly 10 glaciers. So this is how many glaciers this region is home to, roughly 50,000 plus glaciers in the Hindu Kush Himalayas, on which not just people of Ladakh but roughly 2 billion people depend on the Indian subcontinent and also on the Tibetan Chinese side. So these are very important for the livelihoods of so many people and of course so many other living beings in this region. So you can see how very different the landscape is here. Looks more like a moonscape or Marscape than a picture from the planet Earth, except for those oases of greenery that you see. They are what our ancestors did to this part, where life was almost not possible. They not only came thousands of years ago and survived, but actually thrived. A colorful civilization with its own language, literature, music, dance, spirituality, and a life in harmony with nature thrived, which is what I think today the world could learn from. Not just in Ladakh, I've been meeting indigenous people in different countries, in Scandinavia with the Samis, in other regions of Himalayas and other mountain regions. They have a lot to give to the world, which perhaps is still gung-ho with its industrial revolution. But now as we see slowly how that very modernization is, cutting at our roots, perhaps will make people realize that there is some wisdom in these civilizations. Now let me take you to what is happening up in the high Himalayas so that you get a first-hand picture and understand when you hear data and figures and lectures and reports of climate change. With global warming, our glaciers are melting away very fast, and it's causing shortage of water in already a water scarce region. It's a mountain desert on the Tibetan plateau, high altitude cold desert, and these glaciers are not going silently away. This is a Drangdrung glacier, which used to be a majestic towering glacier some 25 years ago when I went there. Today it's a shadow of itself, and as I said, they are not going quietly. They either leave lakes like you see there, and they become bigger and bigger, and sometimes they burst and cause big floods, or they cause torrents in the summer heat, which can again be devastating, especially if it is accompanied by a cloud burst, which is happening more and more because now with global warming, the monsoon clouds seem to rise higher. So even Himalayas are often not able to become a barrier for the monsoon clouds. So then conditions come together which causes cloudbursts, and the heat of the summer melts the glaciers very fast. They each could cause flash floods, or if a combination of these conditions come, then much worse. So let me show you how it is on ground. In 2006, there was a big flash flood in the valley called Phyang. Many houses were washed away, lives lost, fields covered. I went there as a volunteer to help the villagers, but curious I am, so I caught hold of an old man, the oldest man around, to ask about such incidences. So I asked him, when was the last time you saw such a flash flood? And the old man said, I don't remember. I've heard some stories as a child, but I have not seen anything like this. That was 2006. So rare. The next one was 2010, when a quarter of the Leh city was washed away. Roughly 1,000 people went missing. Much damage to life and property. Just 4 years after the old man said he had never seen one. The next one was 2013, and the next one was 2017. So this is how frequent the melting of the glaciers and other conditions are causing devastation in our abode. Despite these incidences of flash floods punctuated by droughts, because with each flash flood and downpour, the vegetation and the fine soils are washed away, so it doesn't take a rain as strong as the previous one to cause a flash flood, because there is no holding capacity in the hills. With the vegetation and the fines gone, a smaller rain can cause a flash flood. On the other hand, we, the indigenous people there, are also not sitting hand on hand silently observing all this. We try whatever we can do. We have been doing two things. Personally speaking, I've been engaged in two things: mitigation and adaptation. Although generally mitigation is for the big cities, the cause of all this, it's for them to do, but we believe that we should not be a part of this path. So, for the last 3 decades, we have been trying to find solutions to avoid ourselves becoming a part of the emission and pollution, with a alternative school called the Sekmul Alternative School. It's an educational innovation, particularly because it addresses those who have failed in the conventional education system, and the admission criteria therefore is failure in the system rather than grades and marks and so on. And we wanted to also show what a bad system can do to perfectly normal young people, and given the right environment, even those so-called failures can change the world. So this school was set up in the mid-90s, and it was built with earth as the building material, natural material, abundant right under our feet, free of cost for anybody, rich or poor. Heated and powered by sun, again shines over everybody's head, rich or poor. Nobody is so poor they can't afford earth or sun. And if these two come together with human ingenuity, magic can happen and people can live happily ever after. So this was then powered by solar electricity for electricity needs. Other major needs like heat were directly from passive solar heating, and this could have been the world's first carbon neutral, off-grid, energy positive if not zero campus when these terms were not even coined. At this school, almost all use of energy is with the sun, whether it is cooking with concentrated dishes or greenhouses that give us fresh greens in winters, natural lighting, electricity, pumping, water heating. Even cows on this school campus live in solar heated cow sheds and give much more milk than any other cows, because heating them with sun is much cheaper way than using their food for keeping their bodies warm in a polar climate. Anyway, we put to use what is in the textbooks in 9th grade, 10th grade on heat and various other subjects to make life better. So using the chapter on heat, conduction, convection, radiation, we would design together with the students buildings that used only sun and nothing else for heating. And you will be surprised, in a very cold climate like Ladakh, we can live as good or modern as anybody in New York or London. Just that there they would use up all the natural resources to do so. Here it's with sun, which is clean and green. So what happens finally is that in minus 20 outdoor temperatures, these buildings stay at plus 18, which is anytime much warmer than Delhi in January. So I always come in January to Delhi from Ladakh and say I feel cold in Delhi. If you use a little more of geography to this, then you can also orient, knowing where the sun is in winter, summer, spring and autumn. This can also become a building that is cool in summer while being warm in winters. So we have been trying our bit to not add to the carbon in the air, even in these harsh conditions. And not only that, now we are extending this technology to, say, Indian Army. We ourselves emit so little anyway, so we won't make such a dent, but armies of the world have a huge contribution to greenhouse gases. So I can say that in Ladakh, Indian Army is perhaps one of the most advanced armies in the world, going green and adopting carbon neutral solar heated shelters for their soldiers. So we've been extending this at the highest positions of the army in Ladakh, where they can live free of carbon, fire accidents and so on. We are also working to make it available to the other side of the border, to the Pakistanis, to the Chinese, because after all, pollution knows no boundaries. So we would like this region to be decarbonized, because together the three armies emit roughly 2 million tons of CO2 every winter. Now, for taking such solutions, which are indigenous solutions, indigenous people are not there just to be given help and so on, they can also find solutions and extend it elsewhere. So we are starting an alternative university for mountain development, makers and doers university, where students in their 20s do not just sit in classrooms listening to lectures, but go out and change the world. So this is the desert where we have started this. It's an international university, the beginnings of which are already starting for the mountains of the world, because mountains are one of the most not understood, misunderstood regions of our planet. So, there is a vacuum in knowledge and technologies for the mountains, and our vision is to make it like that, starting in a very difficult, challenging desert to finding solutions to green it using various technologies like artificial glaciers, water and sun to make it comfortable without destroying the planet. Now, towards the water challenges, as I said, our glaciers are melting away very fast. Few years ago, some of my students, we started working on an idea whether we can make our own glaciers as our natural ones are going away, at least refreezing what is melting. So, for understanding that, this is a typical Ladakhi village. Just to understand the topography, there's always a stream like you see there, around which civilization settles. So, on the other side there are fields, and then the stream goes down into the Indus River in this case, and then down into the Arabian Sea finally. It comes from the glaciers, and in springtime, when farmers need water the most, there's very little in these streams, because A, the glaciers are much higher up and therefore not yet melting. B, they are smaller and smaller now. But come summer, and there is actually a big torrent in these streams, floods even. And this big flow continues into autumn and winter. And even in winter, there is a stream like you see here, when nobody needs water. So we said, when nobody needs water, why don't we freeze it? Because winter is that window of opportunity where water can be stored as frozen solid mass, and then it melts later in the spring. We don't have money or much technologies, but we don't blame what we don't have. We try to use what we do have, and what we do have is gravity. Like we have sun, which is free of cost for all, we have gravity, which is free of cost. And gravity can be a great resource, which means we have slopes, upslopes, downslopes, downstream in the mountains. So, if you use just simple principles of science from primary and middle schools, we can freeze the ice in ways that it will not melt. What we observed and what people laughed at us was that how can you keep ice from January and February till June? The sun will melt it. Sure, sun will melt it. So, how do we keep it from the sun, shade it? Well, the Swiss have been doing that for their ski slopes and things, covering with fleece, but that sounded not very viable or practical. So, we instead used geometry. Geometry comes free, like gravity, like the sun. In geometry, you learn, if you remember, certain shapes have low surface area for the given volume. Shapes like spheres, hemispheres, and even cones, which are more practical than spheres of ice. So, we said we should freeze our ice in giant cones or pyramids. Then there will be not enough surface area for the sun to melt it, and enough volume for the farmers to use it. But pyramids are easier said than done, to make a pyramid, So, we said, why not we use a little bit of physics? We don't have pumps, which it will take. If you were to make a pyramid of 10 or 15 stories, it will take giant pumps. We don't have them or the money to run those pumps. So, all we used was gravity and simple pipes. Like primary school science says, water always maintains its level. If you put a pipe upstream like there and bring it downstream where water is needed, there will be pressure in the pipe, for the water wants to go to the inlet level. These pipes can be kilometers long. No? And when you go down and to this pressure at a fountain, water can be sprayed into the air like a pump. Without a pump, like this. This is 6 stories tall, carries 1 million liters of water. There is no moving parts, no pump, no pollution, no power bills, just a pipe. So that's how water, which is liquid, can be taken to 12 stories high without any power, without any people carrying, because it follows hydraulics, liquid state. But we need solid pyramids. So mid-air, we turn it into solid by exposing it to minus 20 air, where it loses its heat. The liquid loses its latent heat, if you remember your science, and becomes solid as it falls. So you get a pyramid of ice. Now this pyramid of ice should last much longer in the season. That was the hypothesis, and we tested with prototypes and pilots, and interestingly we saw that they lasted till June and July, from January, and in May, June, July it would slowly melt and release its water, which could then be used to green a dry desert or to augment the flow in a stream. So you can have cascades of them. You may see a tiny little figure, that's a man in the stream down there. So they can be large. Some of them that villagers built, it has become a kind of movement. This one on the left is half the height of Qutub Minar, carries 12 million liters of water, and we didn't, but there's a whole competition of making ice stupas in winters in Ladakh. Stupas they were called so that it could connect to the people. We could have called them pyramids or cones, but that doesn't mean anything to people. Stupas, which are spiritual monuments dotting the whole landscape, makes a lot of meaning, and we often see elderly people prostrating and praying to the ice stupas also, and which is what we should be doing to our natural resources. Anyway, so it has become a movement in various countries and beyond ours alone. And finally, we are now moving up to see whether we can do it beyond just streams of Ladakh. As I said, there are lakes, glacial lakes, which outburst and cause floods called GLOF. We've been working on high altitudes to see if we can refreeze these glacial lakes and thereby reduce their risk of causing floods like that. Again, that's an imagination. The lake there, if we can drain it or siphon it out by reducing it and refreezing it so that it can be used. We did some prototype tests in a high altitude lake in Sikkim, where we siphoned the lake out to some extent to see how we can refreeze it. Now, finally, to bring to this forum, these lakes can actually be a source of energy. You know, the science is there. Liquid water is actually energy. Frozen is lower energy. So it should always be not so difficult to take energy and make it frozen. A lake that is frozen is not dangerous. A lake that is liquid will melt the glacier even faster because of convection currents. So the best is to freeze the lake. And to freeze the lake, while it's not easy, it shouldn't be so difficult also, because it is to lower the energy level from liquid to solid should not be possible. In the process, you will actually gain some energy, and therefore these could become sources of energy. There are already technologies like heat pumps. You give it 1 unit of energy in electricity and it can give you back 3 to 4 units of heat. This could be used in polar regions. We are going a little wild and imagining possibilities why we can't drain the energy out of the polar regions and use it for human use, or just to radiate it to outer space to take the heat out only, or use it, and as you pump the heat out of the polar ice, it will freeze faster, but of course it will have to be huge scales not with pistons and cylinders, but maybe with organic diaphragms. So you have technologies like heat pumps and Stirling engines, which actually give work or electricity. You can produce electricity. So we are working on Himalayan lakes, on concepts that could freeze the lake and in the process give you work or energy like heat, which is much needed, and also freeze the water that we want to, which could then be extended at a later stage to even polar ice caps to expand them. And energy treasure, it could be seen as, that can then also do the job of freezing. We would like to collaborate with any institutes or people who are interested in such concepts. So in short, we are trying to not only solve our own problems, but also be a part of the solution as indigenous people, protecting ourselves and also, if possible, collaborating with others to become a solution at a larger scale. Thank you very much.